Have you ever loved someone who kept you close enough to touch but never close enough to truly reach? Someone who looked at you as if they saw your soul, yet the moment you leaned in, they disappeared behind silence. That is the strange gravity of the avoidant heart, drawn to love like a moth to light, yet terrified of being consumed by it. The shadow of love in avoidant relationships is not easily seen because it hides beneath gestures of independence, calm detachment, and rational explanation. On the surface, the avoidant partner may appear composed, self-contained, even admirable in their emotional control. But underneath that surface lies an unspoken fear, a belief that closeness equals danger, that vulnerability invites loss of self. This fear often originates in early emotional experiences, where love may have been inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming. The avoidant person learns not that love is absent, but that love costs too much. They internalize the lesson that needing someone leads to disappointment, that attachment is followed by pain. So they build their safety in distance, creating an emotional structure that protects them from both rejection and dependency. When love enters such a heart, it awakens both longing and terror. The avoidant may feel drawn to the warmth of connection, yet every step closer feels like approaching a fire that burns too brightly. The more intense the bond becomes, the more the shadow grows, whispering that to be known is to be trapped, to be loved is to lose control. This tension creates a paradoxical behavior. They crave affection but sabotage intimacy. They speak of freedom but live in quiet fear of their own emotions. The partner of an avoidant often senses this contradiction. They can feel love present but unreachable, like sunlight through glass. Attempts to communicate or reassure often backfire, for the avoidant interprets emotional pursuit as threat rather than care. The shadow of love reveals itself in subtle ways. The avoidant might withdraw after a moment of closeness, start arguments to create distance, or hide behind intellectual discussions when emotions rise. They may appear to lose interest once they sense dependency forming, not because their feelings vanish, but because they fear being engulfed. In truth, their withdrawal is an act of self-preservation. It is an unconscious attempt to prevent re-experiencing old wounds of abandonment or intrusion. Yet the more they protect themselves, the more isolated they become. This isolation, though painful, feels safer than the unpredictable vulnerability of love. The tragedy of this shadow is that it deceives both partners. The avoidant believes they are maintaining control when in reality they are controlled by fear. Their partner believes they are unloved when in reality they are being loved from behind emotional armor. Both stand in the same relationship but live in different realities, one fighting for closeness, the other fighting for safety. Love in this dynamic becomes a battleground of unseen forces where tenderness and terror coexist. Understanding the shadow of love means recognizing that avoidance is not the absence of emotion, but the defense against it. Beneath every avoidant silence is an unspoken desire to love freely. But that desire remains trapped in the shadow until they learn that safety does not come from distance, but from the courage to remain present despite the fear that love brings. There comes a quiet moment in every avoidant relationship when the distance stops being temporary and becomes a way of life. It doesn't happen in an explosion of anger or the drama of goodbye. It begins slowly, almost imperceptibly, when the avoidant partner starts withdrawing not to rest, but to disappear. At first, they may still respond, still smile, still offer fragments of connection, but something shifts beneath the surface. Their words lose warmth, their eyes avoid holding yours for too long, and conversations that once felt alive now echo with polite distance. This is the threshold of emotional flight, the subtle point where connection transforms into self-protection and where love starts to dissolve into silence. For the avoidant, this threshold feels necessary. Intimacy has begun to feel suffocating, their personal boundaries invaded by affection that feels too heavy, too demanding. To them, closeness awakens a sense of losing identity, of being consumed by another's emotional presence. Their instinct, often unconscious, is to retreat. They pull back to preserve a sense of control, to reclaim the illusion of independence that makes them feel safe. The tragedy is that they do not realize they are not retreating from the other person. They are fleeing from their own vulnerability. The moment they feel seen too deeply, their defense system activates, urging them to escape before they risk rejection or disappointment. The partner, meanwhile, senses the shift but cannot quite name it. They feel an invisible wall rising between them, though nothing obvious seems wrong. They may try to reach through it with reassurance, patience, or emotional appeal, but each attempt only deepens the divide. The avoidant interprets this effort as pressure, as a threat to their autonomy. They begin to associate the relationship not with comfort, but with anxiety. And once this link is formed, when love becomes synonymous with entrapment, it marks the beginning of emotional detachment that can rarely be undone. This is the true point of no return, not the day someone leaves, but the moment they stop showing up emotionally while still physically present. In this stage, conversations turn practical, gestures become routine, and silence replaces vulnerability. The avoidant begins to feel relief in solitude and discomfort in connection. They rationalize their distance as needing space, when in truth they are numbing themselves against emotional exposure. The partner, feeling this withdrawal, often responds with confusion, then resentment, and eventually grief. They sense they are losing something sacred, yet they cannot find a way back to where it was lost. What remains is a ghost of intimacy. Two people still bound by the form of a relationship, but separated by a widening emotional abyss. The threshold of emotional flight is not crossed deliberately, it is a psychological reflex. Once the avoidant crosses it, returning to openness feels impossible without deep inner work. The relationship then becomes a mirror reflecting the fear that love demands too much and gives too little safety in return. Love in avoidant relationships rarely ends with a storm. More often it erodes quietly, like a coastline slowly washed away by the tide. The beginning of this collapse is so subtle that neither partner notices when the foundation starts to crack. Words that once carried warmth begin to sound rehearsed. Shared silences, once comforting, start to feel heavy. A touch that once communicated safety now lingers with a quiet tension. This is the silent collapse of connection, a gradual fading where absence grows louder than presence, and emotional distance becomes the unspoken language between two people who once reached for each other without fear. For the avoidant partner, this collapse begins as a defense mechanism. When closeness becomes too intense, their system shifts into withdrawal. It isn't always a conscious choice. They slowly turn their attention inward, seeking safety in detachment. Instead of open conversations, they give short replies. Instead of emotional honesty, they offer practicality. They stop making themselves available in small, consistent ways. The partner may notice that they are no longer met with enthusiasm, only polite tolerance. It's not that love has disappeared entirely at this stage, but that the avoidant is numbing it to avoid the weight of vulnerability. They begin to equate emotional intimacy with suffocation, and so they retreat into silence. The partner on the other side experiences this collapse as confusion. They may sense that something is wrong but cannot quite define it. The relationship still exists in form, but its soul has grown quiet. Attempts to address the growing distance often lead to more withdrawal. Questions feel like pressure, honesty feels unsafe, and closeness feels threatening to the avoidant. This dynamic creates a cycle where one reaches out and the other steps back, until both are moving in opposite directions without realizing it. The distance then stops being temporary. It becomes the atmosphere of the relationship. Silence begins to replace arguments, not because there is peace, but because there is nothing left to fight for. When people stop arguing, it can sometimes mean they have stopped hoping to be understood. This is one of the most painful parts of an avoidant relationship's decline, the emptiness that settles in without ever announcing itself. Love doesn't die dramatically here. It fades through neglect, through avoidance of difficult conversations, through the fear of being seen too deeply. Both partners begin to live parallel lives, sharing space but not their inner worlds. The avoidant may convince themselves that this emotional deadness is stability. The partner may cling to fragments of the past, hoping to reignite what once was. But the connection has already begun to decay in silence. The absence of emotional exchange becomes a quiet confirmation that the relationship is no longer alive in its original form. This is the silent collapse, a soft ending that doesn't shout, but slowly drains the bond of its warmth until love becomes only a memory of what it once felt like to truly be held. Inside every avoidant heart exists a private war between two opposing forces, the longing for closeness and the fear of it. This conflict is not visible to the outside world. It plays out quietly beneath calm expressions and composed behavior. On one side, there is the deep human desire to connect, to be known, to rest in the safety of another's presence. On the other, there is a powerful instinct to protect oneself from being overwhelmed or controlled. These two forces rarely coexist peacefully. The desire pulls the avoidant toward intimacy, but the fear pushes them away the moment they begin to feel vulnerable. It is this constant inner split that defines the emotional landscape of avoidant relationships. When love begins to grow, it awakens hope in the avoidant, the possibility that they can finally experience connection without losing themselves. Yet, as that bond deepens, old fears resurface. The mind recalls every past moment when closeness brought pain, every time love was tied to rejection or judgment. The body reacts before the person can reason it away. The heart closes, the nervous system tightens, and the instinct to withdraw takes control. They may say they need space, that they are overwhelmed, or that they simply don't know what they feel. Beneath these words lies the truth. They are terrified of the emotional exposure that intimacy demands. This internal conflict is exhausting for the avoidant. They often feel shame for not being able to love freely, guilt for hurting someone who only wanted to be close, and confusion over why their feelings shift so suddenly. They might tell themselves that their partner is too emotional or too needy, not realizing that they are projecting their own buried fear of dependence. When they do allow themselves to feel love, it comes with a sense of danger, as if opening their heart means giving up control, so they alternate between reaching out and pulling back, creating a rhythm of connection and withdrawal that leaves both partners disoriented. The partner, in turn, feels caught in the middle of this invisible battle. They experience moments of deep intimacy followed by cold distance, affection followed by silence. They try to understand, to adapt, to reassure, but the cycle continues. What they don't see is that the avoidance fear is not about them. It's about the unresolved wounds that live within the avoidant's own psyche. The conflict is internal, not relational, but its effects bleed into every interaction. This inner split between desire and defense cannot be resolved through external effort. It requires the avoidant to face their own fear of love, to acknowledge that vulnerability is not weakness, but the path to wholeness. Only when they confront this conflict within themselves can love stop being a battlefield and begin to feel like safety. Until then, their relationships will continue to mirror the same struggle, the yearning to be close while running from the very closeness they crave. Reaching the point of no return in an avoidant relationship is often mistaken for failure, but in truth, it can be a profound moment of revelation. It marks the place where love can no longer be sustained through pursuit or persuasion, where both individuals are forced to face what has been avoided all along: the need for inner reconciliation. When connection finally breaks under the weight of fear, what remains is an invitation to look inward. The pain that follows this breaking is not meaningless. It is the soul's way of demanding awareness, urging both partners to stop repeating old patterns and begin the deeper work of understanding themselves. For the avoidant, this moment can feel like freedom at first. The emotional pressure lifts, the expectations dissolve, and they may believe they have reclaimed peace. Yet in solitude, they eventually confront the silence they once craved. The absence of connection reveals the cost of their defenses. The safety they protected came at the price of genuine intimacy. It is often only in the emptiness that follows disconnection that the avoidant begins to feel the true depth of what was lost. The space that once felt liberating starts to echo with loneliness, and that loneliness becomes a mirror reflecting back the truth. The fear that drove them to avoid love is the same fear that now isolates them. For the partner who tried to hold the relationship together, this point of no return can be devastating but also transformative. The realization comes that love cannot heal someone who refuses to face their own fear. Effort, patience, and compassion reach their limits, and what was once hope must become acceptance. This acceptance does not mean indifference. It means choosing to release the illusion that one can save another from their own inner struggle. It is in this acceptance that personal power begins to return. The partner learns that love, no matter how deep, cannot substitute for another's self-awareness. The path that follows this breaking is one of individuation. Both individuals are called to reclaim the parts of themselves they abandoned in the relationship. The avoidant must rediscover the courage to feel, and the partner must rediscover the strength to let go. It is through this separation that growth begins. Love, when stripped of its illusions, becomes a teacher rather than a possession. What once felt like an ending transforms into an initiation, into deeper understanding of love, of fear, and of the self. The point of no return is not the death of connection, but the end of unconscious repetition. It is the moment the pattern collapses, leaving behind space for something real to emerge. Those who reach it are faced with a choice: continue running from the shadow or turn inward and confront it. Only then can the loneliness that once protected them become the doorway through which healing and authentic love can finally enter. In every avoidant relationship, there comes a moment when love can no longer chase what hides. That moment, the point of no return, is not where love dies, but where truth begins. It is where illusion gives way to awareness, where both souls are stripped bare before the mirror of their fears. The avoidant learns that freedom without intimacy is emptiness, and the partner learns that love without self-respect is surrender. What feels like an ending is, in truth, the threshold of transformation, the quiet beginning of a more conscious love, born not from fear, but from understanding.